VisibleThread. We will be taking questions at the end of this session. Make sure to submit any questions you may have to the Q&A box on your screen, and all recordings and slides will be available after the event ends. I am thrilled to introduce our speaker, Fergal McGovern, CEO of VisibleThread. During this session, you will get a glimpse of the future of VisibleThread as we focus on using the right technology for the right task. And now I will hand it over to you, Fergal.
Hey, Chloe, thanks so much for the intro, and welcome everybody to this session. I hope you find it useful and helpful as we explain our perspective on technology. So I guess we would not be doing ourselves justice if we didn't talk about AI, because AI is certainly the dominant factor over the last 2 years. And I guess as I think about AI, and don't worry, I won't be dominating this session with AI exclusively, but it is important to consider where it fits, particularly as you talk about technology. So when you think about AI, about 2 years ago, in fact, a little over 2 years ago, November 2022, ChatGPT hit the scene, and all of a sudden everybody was kind of wondering about AI. People like the Washington Post were wondering in 2023, was this a gold rush? In fact, they were proclaiming that there was an AI, quote unquote, gold rush going on. That was kind of a lot of excitement, a lot of exuberance. The Wall Street Journal were talking about economic revolutions attributed to AI. And kind of interestingly, the New York Times were predicting the demise of humanity, which is a bit over the top and, you know, interesting, of course. And that was a year of hype. It was a year of fear. It was a year of exuberance. It was a year of kind of, you know, wondering what the heck is this AI stuff? It seemed to be a hugely interesting and sometimes scary idea. Now roll on the clock to 2024. We have the Washington Post now declaring the hype bubble deflating. It's burst. The Wall Street Journal talking about the revolution losing steam. And now the New York Times are talking about, you know, whatever happened to the AI zombie apocalypse, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like topsy-turvy stuff. On one hand, 2023, all hype, all fear, all excitement, all kind of, you know, people running around wondering, was my job at risk? And 2024, suddenly it's the flip of that. It's like, yeah, this thing is overblown, it's hype. And, you know, in some ways you could say, well, is this false hype or a true revolution? And as ever in life, things rarely go in binary ways. It's neither one nor the other. It's probably something in between. Now, here's the thing. That's absolutely not a question we're asking ourselves, because AI in the end is technology, and technology is there to serve our business purposes. So we really don't care about AI in one sense. It sounds odd coming from a technology company like VisibleThread. AI is fantastic, but it's part of a technology stack that is there to solve business problems. What we care about is this. How do we help you drive growth, top-line growth, and efficiency? And efficiency either translates into doing more with less or having better operating profits. That's what we care about. In fact, that's what we at VisibleThread care about hugely. I'm very concerned about how we drive our own top-line growth. And equally, I'm concerned about how do we do it in a very efficient way. So that's the real question. That has been the real question since I started VisibleThread 15 years ago. That is the question that is consistently what we're hearing from our customers, irrespective of AI. AI is simply a mechanism to achieve top-line growth or drive better efficiency, and ideally, both. And when I talk about efficiency, this is the type of efficiency I'm talking about. This is Georgia Tech Research Institute. This is showing you that before adopting automation, happens to be in the form of VisibleThread, but it could be any automation. In their case, it was taking them 79 hours to do things like looking at FAR DFARs, analyze, you know, do they have their acronyms correctly defined, look at revision management. That collapsed down to 12.3 hours, 66.7% faster. True automation, true using VisibleThread. Again, choose your products, choose your tools. It doesn't really matter what the automation is, but these are the potential optimization quantums you can expect with the right solution for the right job to be solved for. So that's what we're interested in, efficiency. And of course, with efficiency, you free people up to do more work and more strategic work. And that is the big promise. It's not just an efficiency gain, it's actually what you can now do with that free time that you didn't have before. And that's where your quality improvement happens. That's what we're interested in. Now, always it's useful as a product vendor for us to stay grounded. So a few months back, we actually conducted a survey and we asked customers, a good number of our customers, what were the challenges they were facing. We did the survey and published the results, and these results are available on our website. Indeed, I think they're available as a download in the portal that you're currently looking at, but we found some very interesting stats for this survey. The first one that really jumped out is inefficiencies. 91% of respondents, and this is 42 medium to enterprise customers, so 9 out of 10 of these customers say that inefficiency is affecting project timelines. Now that's a really interesting point because project timelines in the world of BD capture, proposal development, compliance, contracts, and delivery, those things don't slip. The government doesn't suddenly say, you're running over, I see you're not going to make it, therefore I'll extend the deadline. That's not how it works. And when you're slipping and impacting project deadlines, due to inefficiency, you're compromising quality. So there's huge opportunity to improve this. The second interesting stat was this: 66%, so 2 out of every 3 respondents cited their data process as being ineffective or neutral. To make that concrete, what does that mean? It means how they store data, the accessibility of data, the exchange of data between teams, the coordination that goes on between proposals, contracts, pricing, program delivery, solutioning, the exchange of data, ineffective. 2 out of 3. Huge opportunity for efficiency here as well and better quality outcomes. And the final one that was really profound, when I read this, I was blown away. 90%, 9 out of 10 companies, again in this sample, so it's a pretty standard sample of 42 companies, 9 out of 10 seeing a direct link between inefficiencies and reduced return on investment. So again, these are direct business impacts. We're either pursuing the wrong stuff, we're going into proposals and maybe producing substandard responses, we're missing some key line items, we're missing some key requirements, lots of reasons for the reduced return on investment. And optimizing your P-win and optimizing your staffing and resourcing is really a huge opportunity as we look into 2025. And this survey just simply reinforced what we have been operating under the basis of for the last 10, 15 years, which is we have huge opportunity to move a fundamentally manual process, highly manual, highly complex, lots of moving parts. In many cases, the height of automation is basically a bunch of emails floating around with attachments and people getting to it when they can, and extremely stretched, working too many hours. Burnout is a key factor. People management is really tough. It is a hard industry we're serving, and we're working to do much better. And I think you guys, in fairness, are really, challenged to be hyper efficient, to do more with less, to get better quality outcomes while still maintaining a good work-life balance. It's really hard. And automation is one big way in which you can actually overcome these challenges. And that is in the face of a competitive market. This is a survey that Deltek did this year. It's the Clarity 2024 survey. Increased competition, the number one challenge facing BD. And if you think about it, that's all of us. We're all trying to drive growth in our businesses, maintain operational profitability. Increased competition is happening, and there's no reason to believe that that will change in 2025. And in fact, if anything, with the new administration, with uncertainty around how government are going to be managing these things, one example is Alliant 3. In the previous Alliant 2, there was 200 people who qualified on the IDIQ. Now it's down to 75, 100. It's compressing the competitive element and really making it important that you do the most best quality output with possibly either a static resource pool or indeed a reduced resource pool. So technology is really the big answer to all of this. And that brings us neatly to this question. How can technology impact the RFP process? We ask ourselves this question all day long, every day of the week. How can it impact? Where can it help in BD? Where can it help throughout the entire life cycle? And again, maybe it's a bit of AI, maybe it's a bit of logical-based software. That's almost a secondary point, but where can technology help? Here's how we view it. We kind of slice it into 4 distinct areas. And what we're trying to do is connect technology with the outcomes. So the first big pillar for us is complying with requirements. We want to help our customers comply with requirements to make sure that you're 100% addressing every last requirement so that then you are compliant and as well, of course, hopefully compelling, and that drives increased win rates. So if when you're trying to comply with requirements, things like shredding can move a slicing up of a 100-page doc into 4 minutes or 5 minutes, that's saving me 4 or 5 hours, freeing my time up. So that's what we mean by helping you comply with requirements. And there's a lot of elements of the VisibleThread product line that help in that context. In terms of RFP data analysis, what do we mean by that? That is really the idea of actually looking at a number of documents side by side, figuring out, are we aligned? Should we be pursuing this program or not? Should we qualify it out? Should we do a quick no rather than actually staying with it, going into proposal phase and actually end up sucking up a lot of time and energy and resource where we're not fundamentally qualified to do so? So it's things like aligning the actual capabilities we have as a customer or as a company, with the customer's ask, their requirements. And we put the outcome of this from a business standpoint as better use of your resources. So if you can do better quality data analysis on the RFP or set of RFPs, right from BD to proposals to programs to contracts, that really helps your resource allocation. Over the last year or 18 months, certainly, contract analysis has become a huge deal for our customers. What do I mean by this? A very simple thing. Contract officers, contract managers, program managers will typically be looking for compliance and risk issues. Things like liquidated damages, termination clauses, inappropriate clauses that are sneaking their way into contracts because people don't have time to redline them in efficient ways. And that then results in overhead later on. It results in risk also later on. You're signing up to something that's an onerous condition, be it as a prime or a sub, and that's not in anybody's interest. So the big benefit of applying automation to contract analysis is lowering risk and reducing friction. So for example, if I can shred a doc, look at it from a contract standpoint, and isolate all of the liquidated damages or termination clauses, share that with a spreadsheet that is generated at the click of a button, so 5 minutes end to end, share it with my colleagues and have them feed back to me, that reduces the feedback loop from possibly days, if not weeks, down to less than a day. And it's something that our customers are doing all day long. And the final part that we position ourselves as really, a fundamental focus for us is content creation. How do we get better first drafts? How do we get single tone of voice at play? And that, of course, is the natural home for where generative AI kicks in, and I'll talk about that in a moment. But that's these 4 pillars that we feel we can drive value for you. And that kind of runs across quite a bit of the life cycle. So where does that run across? Well, in pre-RFP stages, it helps bid no bid analysis, it helps risk assessment, past performance analysis. Going into proposal development, shredding docs, requirements identification, risk analysis, acronym extraction, thematic assessment, a whole bunch of things. There's a lot of value in a lot of different pockets and steps in the process. Content assistance, helping you get a single tone of voice, making sure that if there's 5 or 10 of us collaborating on a proposal, that we're writing in the same style. We've got the same tone of voice, and that's something that's reducing by measuring all the content and actually getting readability scores and helping that process. that really impacts the quality of the proposal, so that it's accessible, it's understandable, so the reviewers will score us in a better way. I talked earlier about the momentum we've had, particularly in the last 18 months around contracts. Certain FARs are risky, certain FARs are benign. Not all FARs are equal. And so basically, if you can get reports on contracts in the space of 1 or 2 clicks that isolate those risky areas, you compress your review cycle. So risk assessment, conflict of interest stuff, versioning is a big one, where, okay, I win my bid, I'm in the aftermarket sector, let's say I'm in a manufacturing company, I'm now actually handling aftermarket comparisons between contract version 1 versus contract version 2 and getting reports that you can manage against, all part of this contract landscape. And the final piece is post-award, things like gap analysis, delivery support, task order support, where you're actually looking at how are we going to deliver against this and what makes sense in this context. So we play in all these various areas, and many of our customers are getting huge value in many of these areas. So at this point, that's a kind of an overview of our perspective, and choosing the right technology for the job is really important. So with that said, what I've been finding over the last, certainly, 18 months, 22 months or so, since ChatGPT hit the streets effectively, is that there's a lot of confusion around what exactly is generative AI. And what I've been trying to do is help people understand how to contextualize generative AI. And using the right technology for the job to be done is a really good lens to look at this. So let me step back and explain, in I hope accessible terms, what this is. And apologies for any of you who have heard me speak before on this, but I think it's worth repeating. How does it actually work? My favorite example is a very simple one. When I say to you, the dog chased the, you might think in your head, the dog chased the cat. It might equally be the dog chased the car, the dog chased the bus, the bee. And if you're my border collie, she loves chasing bees, so it's the dog chased the bee. And generative AI works not because I'm trying to delight you with little kind of fables about dogs and cats and chasing stuff, but basically how generative AI works is that it predicts the next word in a sequence of words, excuse me. So what followed in the dog chased the, fill in the blank, was dictated by the model. The model is called a large language model. It is an engine, if you will. And there is no logic in this. Now, it may be that the model is an extremely good model, so it gives you, by and large, very good results. But it's not calculating anything. It's not like a calculator where it says 2 + 3 = 5. It is instead a predictive technique. This is all that LLMs do. There's a lot of complexity in this, but at its heart, that's what generative AI actually is. And what a lot of people don't realize is that generative AI is one type of AI. There are well over 20 types of AI, and it is just one type for one type of job. So you use different AI technology pieces depending on the job you're trying to do. Great. I want to give you a really concrete example of this in action, and I hope that this helps you kind of, join the dots on this stuff. I think this is really interesting because, I mean, who has not used Microsoft Word? I believe everybody is kind of, in one sense or another, using Microsoft Word. And if you think about Word, and if you've ever used it, you've probably used Control F for find. I want to find, some word or phrase. So here I am in Microsoft Word looking for the phrase cybersecurity. And I'm looking for the phrase and I'm finding it 27 times. I'm using Control F, logical based searching, to find 27 occurrences of cybersecurity. That's what you see on the left. And I'm sure everybody attending here is familiar with this. We use Word all day long, right? And if you're in PDF, you're doing the same thing. You're searching for words. This is logic. This is pattern matching. This is Microsoft building out pattern matching to find words. In this case, example, cybersecurity. Now let's apply a product from the same company, Microsoft. This product is called Copilot. Some of you may have heard of it. In fact, some of you may even be using it. Let's use that product for exactly the same job. I'm now asking Copilot, how many occurrences of cybersecurity are in this document? And it's answering confidently 2. What happened to the other 25 occurrences? Where did they go? Well, the reality is that it's making up the answer. It's hallucinating the answer. It's doing a best guess at this. And the problem with this best guess is that if you read it, you will believe it. It's probably hard to see on the monitor here, but it says the answer to my question, how many occurrences of cybersecurity, which is in that kind of slightly bluish background, it says the term cybersecurity appears twice in the document. Is there anything else you would like to know about this document? Well, yeah, I'd love to know where the other 25 occurrences went, to be honest. And that's the problem. Unless you know your topic, unless I know factually that 27 is the true answer, I could easily believe that 2 is the true answer. This is a classic example of using generative AI for a job that it is utterly unsuited to do. So as you step back, as you look at technology of any hue, of any type, of any color, it doesn't really matter, ours included, look at the jobs you're trying to do and then map them to technology. We found a really interesting way to do that, and I'll share that in a moment. But it brings us neatly to the idea of when do you use generative AI and when do you not use generative AI? So let's talk about when to use it and when not to use it. So I'm going to kind of outline the factors of different types of compute approaches. Generative AI, with that, the truth is dependent on the model. It's predictive, meaning it won't be factually correct by definition. It may be, but it may not be. And the answers are variable. So hallucinations are definitely a factor. There's a fancy computer science phrase called determinism, deterministic software. It basically just is like that search that we did in Microsoft Word, that Control F, that is deterministic. That is pattern-based search, which is 100% accurate and 100% repeatable. Let me make that clear. What does that mean? It means that when I come back next week with the same doc, and by the way, that was NASA soup that I was searching on. When I come back next week and I look at that 150 pages and I look for the word cybersecurity, next week using Control F, I will see 27 occurrences. It's 100% accurate. There are 27, not 25, not 2, not 30, and it's 100% repeatable. That means when I run the same operation twice or 25 times, I get the same answer. That is what standard logical software looks like. It's how it behaves. And there's a time and a place you should use that, and there's also equally a time and a place you should use generative AI. So deterministic software is based on logic. It's not based on predictions. And it's based on code and logical steps in code. And the great benefit here is that there are no hallucinations. But it's much better to use generative AI or different types of AI for other types of jobs. Just this particular job, searching, not really a good use case. And there are many jobs that fall into those categories. So that brings us neatly to the test. You have to ask yourself the question, if I'm trying to automate something and I need 100% accuracy in my results, or I need 100% repeatability in my results, which is run the same operation twice, get the same result, or finally, and it's a little more subtle, I need to know the logic by which I got the results, then you really, really, really should not be using Gen AI for that particular task. You can certainly use it for other tasks, but for that particular objective, not a good idea. Great. Let's make that real. This is what we found to be very, very useful as an approach. It's not a very complex thing. It's, not getting any Nobel Prizes for innovation here. This is really the idea of, we recommend our customers do this. Figure out the goals. What are the business goals? What are you actually trying to automate? So here we have, in this example, 6 goals. The first one is develop a requirements compliance matrix from a government issued request for proposal. Great. The characteristic of that goal is that it must be 100% accurate. We can't afford to miss any requirements because otherwise we may be non-compliant. So therefore, for that particular goal, from a technology standpoint, you need to be using deterministic approaches. So just be very careful of Gen AI only or Gen AI first vendors who tell you that things like shredding or getting an accurate output is going to be achievable by Gen AI. It frankly won't. So you should look at it from that standpoint. If you demand and need 100% accuracy, you really can't use GenAI. It doesn't mean that GenAI isn't extremely useful. It is. So for instance, goal 4, generate a first draft of proposal sections. This is almost a human-like activity. There's no right or wrong proposal section. There's what you deem to be, in European, good stuff. And if I write it by hand or I use a little bit of GenAI action, then that can make a very good outcome. But there isn't one and only one answer to that. So it's a fantastically great use case for generative AI to help us with. So let's make it very real. This is VT Docs. This is looking at, it's almost like Control F on steroids. It is not using generative AI. We will never rewrite this to use generative AI in the same way that Microsoft Word will never rewrite Control F to use generative AI. It makes no sense. It is not appropriate. So we use this. In this case, we're looking for things like will, shall, must, or we're looking for customization or custom terms like termination or breaches or FARs that we don't like. And we're finding where they occur in the context of this document. In this case, this is a Word doc, it's Oasis Plus, all good. And the second thing we do is that we gen that out into a spreadsheet. Again, this is all logical software, because guess what? Getting an accurate spreadsheet is really important. I can't expect GenAI to do this accurately. It would be an inappropriate usage of generative AI. So what would be a good usage would be goal 4, generate a first draft of proposal sections. This is our VT Writer product. It is specifically using generative AI to create first draft, to get you off the blank page. It's doing it in a pretty usable way. In this case, I'm actually asking GenAI, the large language model, to create a first draft RFI response. Great, I'm specifying who the agency is, I'm specifying what the theme of the response should be, and I'm specifying what our differentiation is in the prompt. And then I get a result, and the result, depending on your LLM, your large language model, will be hopefully pretty decent. But you as a human being now need to review what it comes back with, because in the end, it's just predicting the next word in a sequence of words. And there's no veracity on that. You as a human being need to check that. So you've got to make judgment calls in this world of GenAI. And those judgment calls, if the product is well designed, as we feel VT Writer is very well designed, then it'll make it easy for you to make those judgments. And then it will net be a much better force multiplier when it comes to optimizing your editing process and getting you off that blank page. This is where we're now scoring. So this particular screen grab is showing you where we're using deterministic software to score paragraphs, score them for readability. And we're saying, well, I found an extremely complex paragraph here. It's ranking too high on a grade level, grade being the proxy for complexity. And therefore, I'd like to simplify that. So I know the screenshot is probably pretty hard to see, but we're combining both generative AI with deterministic logical assessment and scoring of content to make it a net positive outcome. So it's almost an example of a hybrid product using technologies for the right job at hand. Brilliant. The last thing I should say, and again, this is kind of dependent on what sector you are operating in. For us, a lot of our customers are in regulated sectors. We have a large cohort of customers in defense and space. We have a good chunk of customers in healthcare, IT services, financial services, and these are regulated sectors. And if you're dealing with, CUI constraints, or you need to deploy into SCIFs, secure environments, air-gapped environments, you really need to be careful on using the public cloud. In fact, I would say using ChatGPT, and I'm sure everybody on this call by this stage, it is 2 years in, know that it's pretty dangerous to be putting proprietary information into the open internet. So for us, security is job one. And that's why we are basically LLM, large language model agnostic. So we can plug into pretty much any large language model. And what's happening with most of our customers, certainly the larger customers, is that they're starting to acquire skills around large language models. And they're starting to standardize on certain LLMs. Maybe if they're a Microsoft shop, they're standardizing on the OpenAI LLMs, which are on Azure, GCC High, whatever it might be, and we can hook directly into that. Or certain of our customers wish to take another model that is open source, Mistral Nemo, they tee it up, and we can hook into that as well. So we're not actually shipping any LLMs. We're simply hooking into LLMs that are in the environment already. And that's a very important consideration. And I mention that in the context of high secure environments where we're deploying behind the firewall, customer hosted. These things are really, really important. So that final point here, in highly secure environments, as you think about large language models, as you think about generative AI, zero external connectivity, 100% running behind your firewall, there is zero risk around that approach. And that's, as I say, what most of our certainly defense and space customers are doing, and anybody operating in a regulated sector. Perfect. Let me now switch a little bit. So we've I opened by saying, look, yeah, AI, not AI, it's a technology in the end. Our mission is, as it always was, to drive top line growth and to drive much better efficiency for our customers. That has not changed at all. And now we have this wonderful technology that we can leverage to do certain jobs. So what's our vision? So the big thing, and it's not even a vision thing, it's almost like a mantra that it's our North Star. We want you to choose the right technology for the job to be done. And when you do choose it, I should go back a second, my apologies. My transitions are not working so well here, apologies. What we want to make sure is that when we're doing the jobs that we're trying to do, that they are 100% accurate where it makes sense. So for instance, if we're shredding docs, if we're looking for acronym checks, if we're looking for revision management, these operations need to be 100% accurate. That is absolutely critical for us. So that is a kind of a North Star mantra that we at VisibleThread live by. The next one is that for AI-powered content creation, which is a big chunk of where we're at, that must be 100% secure. It also must be 100% deployable, particularly for customer hosted. And again, the advantage we have as a company is that we've been deploying into the most sensitive environments for the last 12, 13 years. And that has helped us build up some kind of battle-hardened technology that means that at a flip of a switch, we can deploy easily. And many vendors who are newer, who are more Gen AI first, will have to build that out, and it will take some time. So it's just something that it never shows up in a sales demo, but that idea of being 100% secure and deployable into standard environments really stands to you, and your track record in engineering and the fact that we have trust, huge amount of trust with 11 of the top 15 US government contractors really speaks to that idea. The third and final thing, and this is kind of a big part of our vision as we work forward, is that we want to be 100% integrated into your current stack of products and technologies. So that document management side of things, we know that most, if not all of our customers are using SharePoint. So we need to actually be integrated very clearly into that environment, and something that we're going to work very hard on, and you'll start to see the fruits of that in early 2025. So as we look at kind of where we play in this market, so we're obviously focused on being 100% secure. Even in our own public cloud, we need to be rock solid in terms of that. And we deploy in that context as well for non-regulated sectors. But we see it as being basically a kind of a trio, if you will. We support AI content creation. So if you're looking for technology that will help you create better content, help you revise content, we are very strong on that. We're very strong at the analysis part of existing documents, that review point, that bid no bid decisioning point, that ability to kind of see is there gaps between the win themes that we wanted in capture and what's actually written in the proposal. And the final bit is the document management point that I mentioned a moment ago. This idea of we want to be integrated into SharePoint and other systems as well. And the combination of all of those three things, that's where VT Docs and VT Writer in conjunction with each other play a really important role. So that said, I wanted to share with you a little bit about kind of some futures and some exciting work that we're working on at the moment. We will be releasing this in early adopter form in Q1. In early Q1, we're working with some key accounts at the moment and looking at that. And the idea is, how do you actually use and leverage your SharePoint proprietary data, particularly as it pertains to generating content? I'm going to share with you in a moment a kind of a logical architecture around this. This will use a technology called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. But RAG is a tricky one. There's multiple different ways to build RAG, and we'll speak about that in a moment. But I want to share with you how this will look. So this is VT Writer. For any of you who have never seen the product, in the middle part of this, these are a bunch of prompt shortcuts. On the right-hand side, we have a lightweight editor. And on the left-hand side, this is what we're building towards, this idea of a reference file. So in this case, I've loaded up a statement of work. I've selected a part of that statement of work. And now I'm going to insert content into the prompts. And you can see in the middle part, it says, possibly it's a little small, generate a response for this. And we've drawn out from the reference file, which is basically the statement of work, that requirement that we want to speak towards. Now what can I do? Well, I can go and say, okay, answer that question, but answer it based on my predefined content existing either locally on my hard drive or in SharePoint. And we call this idea a collection. So you can set up a collection of docs. And when you set up the collection, you now have a reference point. You have sources to draw upon. And what that means is that we can actually query the large language model, and we can get the sources by which that response is actually guided or dictated. And that's what you're seeing here. We're basically asking the question, okay, answer the question on the SOW using these sources, and here's the answer that the large language model gives you. So it helps ground the actual answer. It doesn't reduce completely the risk of hallucinations, but because we're almost kind of prioritizing content that's in our own SharePoint. So if I, for instance, want to create a draft management plan, well, the chances are that I probably have a folder or a set of files somewhere in SharePoint or locally that have pretty decent management plans. So I would point at those, and that would form the basis for my answer. So my ability to create very quick, rapid turn on this is really interesting. Anybody who's doing cybersecurity or kind of questionnaires, security questionnaires, etc., will be doing this all day long because you've got a whole bunch of previous questionnaires that you filled out. Therefore, I can point at those, I can ask the question and get a very quick and probably quite accurate response, which I do as a human being need to review. Of course I do. And that's the nature of generative AI. So just be careful what you get back. You do need to review, but in general, as you're actually leaning on existing content in your proprietary repository, that's cool and that will work very well. And of course, I will say this has all got to be 100% secure, working in air-gapped environments. And that's how we built it. That's how we've designed it. Doing this stuff is actually fairly trivial if you say, well, everything needs to be in the public cloud. It's actually quite simple to do. The hard bit for security conscious companies is actually the deployment side of things and actually making sure it works in isolated environments. This is actually how it works for any of you who are a little bit more kind of techie oriented. A large language model basically only knows what it knows, and it's baked. It's got a cutoff point. Any of you who will have played with the original GPT stuff that came out in November 2022 probably might remember the idea that the original GPT 3.5 model had a cutoff point of 2021. So that was the final baked item. Large language models know what they know, and they are typically not evolving. It's a big lift to actually have them evolve, and most ones don't. They're static. So how do you combine the knowledge in your proprietary area? Well, you typically do it through what's known as a vector database, and you're codifying those documents, you're indexing, if you will, and you're now combining the results with the large language model. And that's what gives us the result. And then we can source those. We can actually link you back to the reference points where we got the actual answer. If your proprietary store, your SharePoint or your local file system is messy, and you include everything in the messy store, you have different versions, non-final versions, well, then you're going to get a garbage in, garbage out scenario. So you need to pay attention to how your data is structured and how your information architecture is set up. You can get there incrementally, but just be clear that what you put into Gen AI is what you're going to get out. And if you put garbage in, you will get not great results coming out. Great. So just to summarize, I went through in our kind of perspective, we think top line growth and efficiency is the key determinant of success for you and for us. And we think that working with you, we can shape the future. And with your help, we get so many great ideas from our customers. People like, this list. We have over 300 customers, and they are fantastic, and they really give us huge guidance as to what we should and should not do within our product range. So with that said, I might just conclude, and we'll finish up with any questions. And I'm not sure, Chloe, if you're around, but if we have any questions, happy to take those.
Yes, we do have a few. So the first question that came in, could you tell us more about shredding/slicing?
Great question. So for us, and the context of the question may be in the context of why Gen AI is not appropriate for it, but what I would say is, for us, shredding, most people think about a shred as a compliance matrix first step, as in I want to decompose all my requirements in a document into individual rows, let's say in a spreadsheet, and control against those. We view it a little bit differently. Yes, it is the starting step in a compliance matrix, but if we think about what contracts people need to do, or what solution people need to do, a contracts person needs to shred for a different reason. They need to slice up all of the content, and they need to track against compliance in the content. So effectively, when you're looking at that, you're looking at the point of view of, depending on who the audience is, they may have different characteristics that they're looking for in that shred. So the value of shredding, one, our collection of documents, is really the value of decomposing that into a list of rows and then highlighting certain characteristics. And those characteristics are dictated by what we call a search dictionary, which can be a way of searching. So for instance, I might have a search dictionary if I'm looking at it from a FAR DFAR standpoint, with FARs I have no issue with, and then FARs I do have issues with. And then I might look at it from a risk standpoint, and I might say, well, we don't accept termination for convenience clauses. Therefore, I'm going to look for termination, and that's a yellow flag. So we can build up a search dictionary that will flag these things. What's really key about all of this is that it has to be 100% accurate. And that's why when I say shredding, you really cannot use generative AI for accurate shredding. Now, there are vendors out there who will tell you something else. That's okay, that's their business. And I'm not in the business of having slugfests with vendors, but it's really, it's something you just need to be careful. What you're trying to do demands 100% accuracy. Therefore, you really need to look at the technology, the suggested technology solution around that. I hope that makes sense on shredding.
Okay, next question. VT has Gen AI capability. What model does it use?
Great question. So VT, VisibleThread, not Virginia Tech, has Gen AI capability. We are not tied into a specific model. So what we're finding is that our customers are standardizing on their own large language model. Our largest customers are certainly doing that. Because if you think about it, Gen AI is not just a proposal question, it's actually across the entire landscape. So what many of our customers, particularly the bigger ones, and I suspect that this will leach into kind of mid-size and SMBs in due course, their internal IT people need to support a large language model. They're deploying large language models with the lens of what's an efficient financial model for this? What's the calculus around kind of the cost and expense and return on investment? So our view as a company is that we will hook into those large language models that are native to our customers. So we provide functionality, but it's almost like as if you had a steering wheel in a car, but the engine, you can swap it out. And we support the hooking into that, which is really important. So our model, if you don't have your own model, we certainly can suggest a model. The two models that we think are very, very interesting and very, very useful. One is called Mistral Nemo. It's a light model. It's a large language model, but it's on the lesser weight. In other words, it doesn't consume a lot of compute resources. Mistral is a French company. They are very big in open source, and the model and all the weightings in the model are fully published, so you can see everything in that model. It's a wonderful model. The second one that's very powerful is Llama 3 from Meta, or what we might have considered Facebook. The artist formerly known as Facebook. And it's a fantastic model. The Llama series of models are really, really wonderful. So they're the two that we've been toying around and playing with. If you go to our own public cloud, we're using Mistral Nemo. However, we have and can do swap out that model reasonably easily. It takes us about a day to 2 days to swap out that model, but it's working for us. But basically, if you're deploying our products customer hosted, which many of our customers are, I would say the vast majority of the serious customers, meaning in regulated industries, then the actual model will be running behind your firewall. Your IT people will be supporting that model. Very long answer, Dale, and I apologize for the length of it.
And one last question. I am not allowed to use AI in my work for security reasons. How should I make a business case?
The reason you're not allowed to use AI, at least for most folks, and I'll regale you with an anecdote. So one of the Australian government agencies, so in the Australian government, just like the US government, there's many departments and agencies. The agency, which is a sub-agency of the Department of Health, which is around kind of vulnerable kids, they were responsible for that. One of their employees accidentally put content into the public cloud, into ChatGPT, and that content had PII, personally identified information, about a client of theirs who was unfortunately a kid who's been abused. So they then turned around and chopped all access to any Gen AI. It's like an instinctual reaction. That was a horrendous situation to get into. They didn't have appropriate regulatory controls on things, and they chop it. So if you're prevented from using Gen AI at all, it's probably because of people hearing stories like that. So you've got to put kind of regulations and internal restrictions in place. The only safe way, to be honest, in my opinion, to use Gen AI safely is 100% lockdown, where it's all running within your firewall. Your management may not want to do that because they perceive it as a cost. It is a cost. It requires IT resources to do. But that's the best business case. And depending on the size of your company and the openness of the management to have a reasonable discussion, there is a secure way to deploy and use Gen AI, but it does come with some cost. And again, we as a vendor, we're almost kind of, we will support any LLM that you have, but the LLM choice and the support of that large language model running internally is the IT team's responsibility.
Perfect. Before we kind of close this out, Fergal, any last parting words, anything like that?
My only parting words are, when you're looking at technology, and please trust me, I'm not trying to flog VisibleThread products, but it's just, I'm long in the tooth, been through a number of hype cycles. I've been through previous hype cycles where, Java back in 1996 or something, the internet, the web, everything was going to become 100% this or 100% that. This is a hype cycle. It goes through a hype curve. Gartner characterized the curve as kind of the peak of inflated expectations is the top of the curve, and then always hype cycles go through the trough of disillusionment, and that's where you get the 2024 kind of, the Washington Post saying, hey, this bubble is burst, or whatever happened to the zombie apocalypse. What will happen in the next 1, 2, 3 years is that we figure out where the actual value is in Gen AI and where it is in AI, and trust me, it's hugely valuable. Technologists like us need to build it into our products appropriately. Technologists like us have been around serving the industry. In this case, for ourselves, it's been close on 15 years. Know how to deploy securely. That comes with that has value. And when you're sitting in demos and you're listening to stuff, ask the right questions. Make sure the company is around for the longer term. Make sure they can support you. Make sure they can actually have, or they have technology that just doesn't demo very well, because it's easy to demo well in Gen AI land. It's much harder to actually do it correctly, and it will actually work in your context. So just be a little bit prudent as you evaluate technology. I would urge you to evaluate technology, our stuff, other technologies. There must be 30 odd vendors now in the last 2-3 years that are all some flavor of Gen AI, and that's fantastic. Just be conscious that it will not solve every problem. Do not, Gen AI is not a kind of a silver bullet approach. It is highly appropriate for certain jobs, and keep that in mind. That's about it, Chloe, I think.
Perfect. Well, thank you, Fergal, for sharing your expertise with us today. And thank you all for tuning in on this session. Make sure to fill out this survey and leave us some feedback on this session before moving on to the next one, which will be with Wicked Point, where Shelley Sandel and Natasha Adams will cover best practices for effectively managing data in SharePoint. Thanks again, everybody, and we'll see y'all in about 10 minutes.
Thanks so much.